We're starting the Ezra Hashem siman ayin. Okay, and this whole section of the Sefer is being Isaac and slugging up tainas that the Tzionim said. So here's one that he's going to spend a few simanim on. V'hein heruni achshav. In the middle of writing the Sefer, they showed me now an Allah, a piece of paper, nidfeses me'eretz Yisrael, which was printed in Eretz Yisrael. She'eni yodea mihu. I don't know who the author is. Ach zeh ani roya b'dvarav. This I see in his words. Shehu tzioni nilhav. That he's a fiery Zionist. Umatzdik esu apikorsim, and he's bringing proofs to justify the apikorsim. Af b'dvarim she'en bohem shum mamash. Even with arguments that have nothing to them. Okay? V'hevi gam me'akdamas Reb Chaim Vital. So one of the arguments he brings is that in the introduction written by Reb Chaim Vital, Hanidfas b'tchilas Sefer Ho'etz Chaim.
Oh yeah, the Kabbalah. I'll be Kabbalah.
Right, Reb Chaim Vital's Sefer, Sha'ashvua sha'al Yisrael shelo yidchu husaketz, that this oath that the Jews should not force to end, Eino ela ad tashlum ho'elef shana. It's only until 1,000 years after the Churban, v'lo yoiser. So that would be until the year 1069. Basically, after that, they say that this shvu is not in effect. The Zeh of Gomer. This is a complete forgery, a complete misrepresentation of what Reb Chaim Vital said. She'enu medaber sham klal me'oisa shvua. He's not talking about the shvua that's on the Jewish people not to force the end. Rather, he's talking about Hashem's shvua. That Hashem made a shvua that he's not going to end the galus until a certain amount of time. And that Reb Chaim Vital says that shvua is only until 1,000 years. But after 1,000 years, Hashem could end the galus early, whatever, with our tshuva. I mean, he'll end it whenever we do tshuva. But until 1,000 years, he made a shvua not to end it unless there's tshuva me'ahava.
So it's the opposite of what the Tzionim say.
It's going on Hashem's shvua, it's not going on our shvua. Okay, now, just before we go on, I want to show it inside, so take a look. Hakdamas Reb Chaim Vital, page 3, Sefer Eitz Chaim. He says, Omar Oid the Medrash Hanal. It says also in that Medrash, Uvegin da Hishbati Eschem Benois Yerushalayim. Not sure which Medrash he means here, because he says Uvegin da. That's the lashon that's not in Medrash Rabbah. Hishbati Eschem Benois Yerushalayim v'chulu. Pirish Hadvarim. The meaning of this shvua is Kihine Ha'isa Hashvua Hagadoil Elokim, that there was a great shvua to Hashem, Shelo Yo'oru Es HaGeula, that Jews should not arouse the Geula, Ad she'oisa o'ava tiyeh b'chefetz, until the love is desired. V'ratzon toiv, and the good will, k'masha kasav techpatz. K'ven ha'oived esav, like a son serving his father. V'ayil b'chol paltrin delay, a son that could go into his father's palace anywhere he wants. Uv'chol ganizin delay, in all his father's hidden places. V'loi ke'eved, and we become like that son, not like the slave ha'oived b'mishneh. I don't know what it means. Oiv the Mishnah, v'lokech hashivcha amanas the kabel pras, and he marries a shivcha, and he does it only to get the salary that he's paid. He's not like a son. Ukvar amru razal, Chazal say kizman hashvua hu he ad elef shanim. Here's the key words. The shvua goes until elef shan, until 1,000 years. Kamasha kasid zal, as kamasha amru zal, like the Chazal say, bebraisa de Rabbi Yishmael the pirkei heichalos. This is the Kabbalah Sefer Pirkei Cholos. Al pi Daniel v'zel shaynai v'isyavun biyadei ad idan v'idanin uplag idan. It was given into his hand, meaning galus was going to last until a time and 2 times and a half a time. V'eich herahu hakodesh baruch hu liYaakov avinu sar olam v'hu sar shel bavel ayin ukin. Okay, this is mysterious words, but. And I don't know how he gets 1,000 out of the words Idan, V'idan, and Plag Idna. But take a look at the next thing. V'chein v'zoyar parshas Vayera, daf kuf yud zayin amid aleph. The Zohar says, Om Rabbi Yosi, Kol da arichu zibna, yatir mikama de'ukme chavraya, that the galus has lasted as longer than the de'ukme chavraya, longer than the other chaverim of the group said it was. The ihu yoima chad, which is 1 day. Galusa de Knesset Yisrael, the galus of the Jewish people, v'loy yatir tichsiv nasanani shemema kol yom dava. Pasuk Eicha, he made me all the day lonely. So one day is the Galus, and one day in the Kodesh Baruch Hu's eyes is 1,000 years. So therefore, it's 1,000 years. So now, take a look at this. Now, this is the Hakdama to Shalos Tshuvas Yaskil Avdi.
Who is this?
By a Sephardi Mekubal named Rebbe Ovadya Hadaya.
Was he Rishon Acharon?
No, he's a contemporary person. He was around at the time of Hakamas Medina, and he wrote this 10 years after Hakamas Medina.
Was he a Tzioini?
Yeah, and he was a Tzioini. Take a look what he's going to say. 1958.
Like an Ovad Yosef type.
More of a Tzioini than him, because you see Ovad Yosef. We read last week that he said that the Shalosh Shavuos are still in effect. Take a look that this person is going to say that it's not in effect, and this is probably what the Rebbe saw, or a different version of it, because this is 1958, the same year that he's writing Vayoel Moshe. Okay, he says, "Hine," the top of the page 4. "Hine yesh mefakfakim v'hakamas Medina." There's some people who aren't so sure about this this Medina that we made here, the Hagbar so Aliyah and the increase in immigration. They say that it's against the Shalosh Shavuos. In this whole paragraph, he brings down the whole Shalosh Shavuos. And then he says at the bottom here, in the next paragraph Aleph, he says, I'm very upset that
I'm angry at this.
I'm angry that I even have to answer such a question. He says, Milvad, kol echad v'echad misrael ma'amin b'ashgacha. Everybody believes that everything that happens through Ashgacha, she'en l'cha shum davar katan v'gadol ha'mizrachish b'olam, she'en l'mito yisbarach. That nothing in the world happens without Hashem.
Oh, that's an old one. Right. That means Hitler must have been good because he went from Hashem.
Right. Al derech ma she'amru chazal, ein adam noikef etzboim mumata, that nobody could even stub their toe unless Hashem decreed it.
Only the Hashem allows it. It doesn't mean he made you do it. The Hashem allows it.
There it means he decreed it, I think. But I think the pshat is like this: that aviner, everything happens through Hashem. But when something is your choice to do it or not to do it, exactly. you can't attribute it to Hashem. So,
right. Even moving your finger like this to a person, it's still Hashem.
So if it's your choice, so he looked at the Medina as being something that just happened by itself. He's ignoring the fact that we made it. Yidden made it. It's not something that just happened. Okay, let's skip to the next paragraph. Here's the part we want about the Reb Chaim Vital. The actual issue of the Shalosh Shavuos in Nisboyin Ksas B'Sifrei Rishonim Shekidmunu. If we look at the books of the Rishonim, Nimtzaki Bizmanenu Zeh Shehi B'Bchinas Ikvas in the Mashiach Ein Makom L'Chalash Shavuos Halalu. That in our time, which is before Mashiach comes, there's no place for these oaths. The Halach Divrei Hakadosh Reb Chaim Vital Zal B'Akdamasa Nifla B'Sefer Eitz Chaim Omru Oid B'Medrash Hanal. Okay, now here's the whole Reb Chaim Vital that I just read.
Except Reb Chaim Vital never said we're now it was Mashiach.
Right, but he said that it's until 1,000 years. This is what he's taken out from it.
And until then it didn't happen. Until then it never happened since then.
Just skip down to the bottom of the paragraph. Hinei l'cha mefurish. You see from this explicitly ki inyan hashvuos hu rak be'elef shana harishon she'achar hachorban v'lo yoiser. The shvuah only lasts 1,000.
So the Gemara never said that.
It's not the Gemara, it's Reb Chaim Vital, and he never was talking about the shvuah of the Jewish people.
It's in a different medrash.
What?
The shvuah in a different medrash, right?
No, the shvuah of Ksubas, Kufid Aleph.
Yeah.
You mean what shvuah was Reb Chaim Vital talking about?
the one in the medrash, right?
Yeah. He's talking about a shvuah that's on Hashem. Hashem made a shvuah not to make a galus. He said, Hashem shvati bi'api imivoyin omenuchasi. That's the shvuah he's talking about.
We say every week in Kabbalah Shabbos.
You're right.
And I never said just like Hashem swore by the Miragim, not letting you in until 4 years later, so too by really angry at Hashem and Eretz Yisrael, now you can make it be 1,000 years. Those 40 years, there's not a question that they'll come back.
And there's a Gemara in Bava Basra where Rabbi Chana was in the Midbar and he heard a baskol coming out and saying, "Oili shenishbati v'achshav shenishbati mi meferli." Woe to me that I swore, and who will be made for who will annul my oath?
And who was?
So he went back and he told the Rabbanan that he heard this, and they said, well, why didn't you say Mufarlach? Why didn't you annul Hashem's oath? We'll get out of Galus early. So Rabbi Chana said, I was afraid that he was talking about the oath not to bring a Mabul anymore. That's the Gemara in Bava Basra. So you see, Hashem made an oath not to.
And why did we say it by Kabbalah Shabbos? What shaykhs does it have to Shabbos? Why did we say it by Kabbalah Shabbos? Don't know.
No, it's a good question.
Okay.
Al Pi Kabbalah, those Mizmorim. Okay, V'yan shemuatim hema haragilim b'lashonis to'ari. Okay, so the Rebbe says, since very few people today understand the lashon of the Arizal, the Reb Chaim Vital.
So that was his Talmud. He wrote songs, not any sefer though.
He didn't write anything down, right?
But those songs he wrote down.
Zmiris from Shab, like a Kar Riboin, right?
Yeah. No, that was not Arizal. But as a Rebbe Sudat, that's Arizal.
Okay, uvakishur dvarav. So people, very few people understand the connection between his words. So yesh makom lahatois es habrius. There is a place to fool people with this Arizal. What's that? Therefore, I'm going to spend a little time explaining this whole inyan. Just one more thing before we start. I want to look at this one place that's a little different from the Chaim Vital. This is Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Herzog, the first chief rabbi after Hakamas in Medina, and he wrote a sefer here, an article here explaining how he thinks that a Medina is permitted. So one of the things he says here is, he says, Soif davar shaharambam lefichach lo hiskir es hashvuos. The Rambam doesn't mention the shalosh shvuos. Lefichah ledaitoi kvar niftarnu mehem.
Oh, 1,000 years passed already.
Well, he's going to say that in a minute. But first he says, we're already parted from the shvuos la'achar she'umos avru al shvuos shehutl aleihem, because the nations were over on their shvuah first. So
that's a common argument that they were over their shvuos.
Okay, umilvad zois kvar mosar talmidoi shel Reb Chaim Vital zal bal shevet musar. That the Shevet Musar, which was a person who lived in Turkey in the 1700s, his name was Rebbe Yaakov Shapiro from Smyrna, and he was a Talmud of Reb Chaim Vital. I'm not sure exactly how could he be a Talmud, because he's a little bit far removed from him. Reb Chaim Vital lived in 1620, but maybe he was a Talmud of a Talmud. Anyway, so he writes, "Shvuos hugbalu bizman." The Shvuos were limited ad lit haschalas ho'elaf hashishi, until the beginning of the 6th millennium. Ukvar oni peturim mehen. We're already patur now. So he's saying a different zman. He's saying it's not 1069. It's the end of the Elef Hashishi, which is when 1240, right, in the secular calendar. Okay, hinei zeh vadai. So now, Dr. Rebbe, hinei zeh vadai. This is clear. Shemash omer b'krav v'gemara azhar al Yisrael stam blizman. That if the Torah says, or the Gemara says, a prohibition without any zman, you can't go afterwards and say, oh, that was only until a certain time, and after this time it becomes
right. Everything the Gemara said, we give no gvul to until you give a certain time.
We see even bigger chiddush that even when the Torah does give his man, you have to have a heter for it. In other words, so it says before Matan Torah, al precious shel shloishes yamim, that the men and the husbands and wives had to separate for 3 days, and they said beferish 3 days, right? For these 3 days, don't be with your wife. And even so, they weren't allowed to go back until the Torah was matir them explicitly. Right? Moshe said, Hashem said to Moshe, go tell the Jews to go back to their tents. Rashi holds that the pasuk really says that the Isser was given only for 3 days. So we already know from this pasuk that it's only for 3 days. And nevertheless, it wasn't mutter until the Torah was matir. Tosfos holds it's not so explicit that it's only for 3 days. And according to that, you need a pasuk to be matir. Even though it was obvious it was after Matan Torah, so the tam became batal. The reason is no longer applicable. Okay, the whole reason of the separation was for Matan Torah. And still they needed the Beferish Heter to go back. So you see that you don't just say, okay, Isser is only up until...
Right. Even by Yom Tov, even though we all perfectly know when, a day is, we still can't be mevatel Cham. Well, I think by Shavuos too, no matter what reasons we come up with, we cannot be mevatel Cham or the Cham told us. Even if the reasons seem applicable, that, although it's not the case we hear anyhow.
Right. Umavur b'medrash Rabbah shir shirim parsha beis al kosti v'ishbati eschem. That the pasuk says there, the medrash says there, mahu ad shetechpots. What does it mean until this is desired? Malchus shel maila, until the upper kingdom, Hashem's kingdom desires. Lichshetachpots midas hadin me'elav ani hu mevia b'koila koilis. That when the midas hadin decides that it's the time for the geula, I'm going to bring it with koila koilis. V'lo is akiv, I'm not going to delay it. That's why the pasuk says ad shetechpots, ad kan l'shoinai. So you see that this oath is until the last minute of Galus. Until the time HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. The Gam Oz, and even then, it's not going to be us to do it. We're not going to be over on the Shvuah. He'll bring it on its own. And we're not allowed to push for it even 1 second early. The Targum Yonis that we brought down earlier, I think it's Chaf Vav, Chaf Zayin, Shezeh Mashbia Melech HaMashiach Shaloili Yizgaros Be'amei Ara. That Melech HaMashiach is being Mashbia us not to go out, not to start up wars against the nations of the world. L'meipach bin galus to go out of galus. V'loi limroid b'chayoloi say to Goy Gumagoi. And here's the part he wants to show. Not to rebel against Goy Gumagoi soldiers. Shezeh Obviously, if it's talking about Gog and Magog, it's talking about B'mois Mashiach, and even so, even at that time, it's also to do it. Shekefi asher anuroim. We see from this who harba acher hoel of shanim. We see that now it's many years after the 1,000 years. It's almost 1,000 years after the 1,000 years, right? She'ein l'shvuah zu shum zman. We see that the oath has no zman because we see that if Mashiach didn't come yet, and this oath is said on Yimois Mashiach, like the Targum Yonason, it obviously applies even after Elef Shanim.
Yeah, you don't find any Rishonim or Acharonim of that time ever saying, let's make a Medina ready.
Exactly.
You find Chazal saying, make a Medina after Shavuos are over. Believe me, if there was something grand, spirit of making Medina, it would have long ago been said, Baracham, but it wasn't. It was her to start the whole idea.
That's true. We see the shvuah has no time until it's Hashem's will. Another raya. The Rambam says, "Cost of tama shvuah b'shvil sha'alidei oirech hagalus." He says, "Adarabba, the reason why there's a shvuah is because the galus is long. It's not that the galus is long and okay, the shvuah is batal. No, the whole reason for the shvuah is because the galus is so long, tiftzar, that the Jewish people will push. They'll push to get out before the time, haroi. So that's why Hashem had to write a shvuah. Im kain ikra tama shvuah hu b'shvil oirech hagalus. The main purpose of the shvuah is for the length of galus, for a long galus. Levasoif, at the end of galus. Shezed goyim yoister lahaftzir. When the end is coming closer, that's more of a yetzer hara to push to get out. There's more of a yetzer hara for it. The Rambam who spoke about the shvuah and all the other poskim who spoke about it, they all were living after this time. They were all after the year 1069. Nobody had any havamina to disagree. I don't have to bring any more proof to this. That obviously the shvuah is noyeg even bizman hazeh. If we could say on such a thing that an isser that's written in the Gemara, written in the pasuk, that it has a zman, that it has a time limit,
we would have said so.
Not only that, but we could say it on everything. He's saying, if you could say that any isser stam sheyesh la gvul zman, and it has a zman, then even though it wasn't written in the Gemara, that nuchal lahatir chas v'shalom kol haTorah, we could be matir the whole Torah.
Yeah, well, like a 2-day yom, for example, which we're mechuyev to keep, even though we all know when is the next day.
Right, that's a gzeir. But let's say even anything, any derabanan or any deraisa even, you could come up with a svara that this deraisa is only noig until the 1,000 years. Let's say a makubah writes a sefer. Oh, you know what? Shabbos is only noig until 1,000 years. You could do anything.
Yeah, like Shaul Yisraeli, he found the liberalist movement in Israel, where his philosophy is fine for anything. Like he made devices that are the Shabbos way of turning on to the electric. So it's kind of like that.
So you could be matir everything.
Yeah,
Vayoel min alev. Well, this is talking about totally being matir.
Yeah, but
Vayoel min alev to make up from your head. Tam she'ein noigata.
Well, the Reform did.
Okay,
yeah,
this is not
like the Haskalah did. The Haskalah may already read why the Torah was abolished.
This doesn't apply today. That doesn't apply, and basically you could be matir anything this way. The zeb bar she'ein li topic boy. So this is very clear. You can't have any suffix that the shvua is noig b'manaseh. And what did Reb Chaim Vital actually mean? He's going to explain in the next two siman.
But he was quoting a different Medrash.